We live in an age of shouting, but at our best, Americans argue out our differences, pushing ourselves compromise by compromise to a better place. That's why at NorCal News Now, we believe in a different kind of political talk show. On NorCal News Now, we welcome activists and opinion leaders, office holders and candidates from local city council members to top statewide and nationwide office seekers. We talk to them like they're humans, and we expect them to leave their talking points at the door and talk to us and our audience like we're humans too. We believe in unvarnished, in-depth, wide-ranging discussions on a whole host of different topics. Handmade in Northern California, our show is not actually handmade. We make it with professional cameras and microphones like every other broadcast show. We are, after all, not cave people. You can find NorCal News Now on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, our website, on your favorite podcast feed, and on ancient communication technologies like smoke signals and television, but not smoke signals. I think by this point you can see we're a little bit different. So give us a shot. NorCal News Now, a political talk show at the intersection of politics and real life.
Episode of NorCal News Now. We're coming to you from Crush Restaurant in downtown Chico, covering the very exciting and very pivotal South Carolina presidential primary. Aaron, what a night. What a night so far for Joe Biden, who has already been announced as the winner of the South Carolina primary. What do you think about that?
Joe's back, sure. The guy who got fifth in New Hampshire a few weeks ago is now back, having a good day. I don't think it will last more than a few days because Super Tuesday is going to come around.
Yep.
There will be a side that says this is representative of the country and da-da-da. Hillary Clinton won that state by probably a bigger percentage than Biden will come out. And it didn't much speak for the country then. So.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know yet. I mean, right now, at this moment in time, the polls only closed like a half an hour ago. The AP came out and projected Biden as the winner right away. I did see some exit polling that said that among the African-American vote, 60, I think the number was 60 to 17 was the advantage for Biden over Bernie, and then the other 20 some odd percent was split.
Well, you look at the data there, black voters were really swayed by Tom Steyer. He did really well, spent a lot of money in that state to pull those voters. So I'd like to see what percentage of black voters went to Tom Steyer.
Steyer spent a lot of money in that state.
But you got to think, enthusiastic people who are understanding politics are looking at Bernie Sanders, saying they have these problems with medical, or saying they have their children are coming to him saying, hey, I have student debt, please help me, vote for Bernie Sanders. Sort of the people that don't pay attention to politics are the ones that say, oh, Biden, Obama, okay, I'll vote for that. So right. There are black communities in areas that really understand the politics and the situation on the ground, and there are some voters who, aren't that educated yet about who's running and the system going. So, and that's what we've heard from the ground.
But we're starting to see, it's getting real now. This is the fourth election in the cycle.
I would say Hillary Clinton got there on that same recognition in South Carolina.
Yeah, I think so. But Biden's been working this for a while. This isn't his first rodeo. He's been out there, he's been in that state, over the course of times, of the course of elections, dozens of times over the years.
I worry about the Biden campaign, the fact that there's no money coming in, and you got to worry about gaffes and older stuff with an establishment candidate. Things will come up, and you'll see, and I hate to say it, but you'll see a certain element of that disenfranchised manufacturing base that voted for Obama, but then didn't vote for Hillary. It'll come up, and Hunter Biden will be Hillary's emails, and it'll be a same sort of sentiment there. So there are things that there are threats ahead for the Biden campaign.
But that's for any candidate. I mean, any candidate has skeletons in their closet. Any candidate has statements. I mean, the only candidates that don't are those that don't have a record. I mean, Pete Buttigieg probably doesn't have as many of those skeletons because he hasn't been out there as long.
A record.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, so that counts too.
I think with certain things that are happening right now with the coronavirus, different things, I think people are going to go from wanting somebody young to actually maybe somebody, as we see, it's going to be maybe a two-way race between Bernie and Biden. Somebody that's a little wiser, been around for the Ebola virus, been around for some of these things. The interesting thing, Mike, is the Bloomberg campaign, the big, large elephant money in the room, and whether he's just in the race to help Bernie Sanders at this point.
Well, he's not. I mean, I don't think he's helping Bernie Sanders at all. I mean, I think, except maybe as a foil.
I think the optics of it are horrible.
Yeah.
You have a person who's fought for the working class of the American people and has a long record of it, and he's attacking the billionaire class, and you have a billionaire spending hundreds of millions of dollars in ads against that person. I think it's a huge backfire, and I don't see it going away.
Well, I mean, money counts, you know? I mean, it's part and parcel of the process the way it is now. And Bloomberg has said, he's been on record and he's reiterated this on several occasions, that he will offer his very ample resources to whomever wins that Democratic nomination if that candidate wants it. Now, this week, Sanders' team said, we don't want it. We don't want that money. We don't need that money. And we're doing fine with our own small donor donations. So,
well, it's nice of Michael to already declare Bernie Sanders as the nominee.
Well,
but that's not the case on the ground. And if we would have took that, if the campaign would have took that answer, and I don't speak for the campaign, or am I on the campaign, but if they would have took that answer, they would have been guilty of saying, hey, you're not letting the democratic process play out here.
Well, but money, I mean, I'm sure that if Bernie wasn't raising the kind of money he is raising from those small donors, he'd be more amenable to that cash. I mean, certainly
$10 million in 1 week. I think
he's a great fundraiser,
and it's an amazing accomplishment.
It's really unprecedented. It really is.
I'll really be rewarded.
Yeah, and I'll give you that. But again, backing up, you said that Biden is running out of cash. And I think he is. I think it's probably pretty clear that he's not as funded as he needs to be. However,
I like where you're going to go with this.
However, it's very possible that you're going to see Bloomberg drop out at some point before the convention. And I think then you're going to see Bloomberg probably back Biden. I think if Bloomberg looks at this field and says, who does he want to back, Biden is his guy, I'm pretty sure.
He publicly said he'd back Bernie, too.
But I'm saying Bernie's team said they don't want the money. So if Bernie's team isn't going to take that money...
We're not the nominee yet. Why don't you become the nominee? I'm not saying Bernie would ever take the money. I think that is something... If Michael Bloomberg wants to spend lots of money attacking Trump, I'm sure, and outside of, or winning back the Senate that he helped to elect, he can go do that with his money. I don't think that... maybe the Sanders campaign agrees that that money was begotten by not only Bloomberg, but the hard work of Bloomberg employees.
That could be fair. I mean, I think that certainly it depends. I don't know if you can follow the money well enough to know exactly where that all came from. But.
Another interesting thing with Bloomberg is attacking the attacks he's got online right now and all over of Bernie Sanders' record on guns.
Right.
And it's just interesting with his record on stop and frisk and his record on certain things that he would not want to keep apologizing for that but feel like he could call Bernie out for his record on one gun bill. And so I see the Democratic Party setting up very data-centered.
Yeah.
Healthcare is the main issue in exit polling.
It is.
But it's not the main issue for the Bloomberg and possibly going forward the Biden campaign, which is going to be gun control. Something that's very, very polls very high on the list of people's concerns, but not when they go to vote, and not at kitchen table issues.
No, it's not. That's a fair comment. I think that certainly the Bloomberg campaign has made a lot of that, their ability to take on the NRA. I think people do care about it, but yeah, I agree with it. It's a little bit further down the laundry list of things. I think certainly healthcare is number one.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, immigration even to me is a much bigger issue for that. So let me turn to a question which we're going to cover, I think, a little more in the show, but I want to kind of get your take on it. So Bernie at a recent debate, there was a question asked about, what the feeling was of the candidates about whether or not the candidate with the plurality could win the nomination on first ballot, or if it should be a majority. And of course, no surprise, Bernie was the only one on the stage who raised his hand and said that he thought that a plurality would be good enough. Do you feel like it's good enough?
I don't think it's no surprise. I mean, I would like other candidates to raise their hand on that. This is a party that wants to do away or says they want to do away with the Electoral College.
Right.
And the reason why is because it doesn't represent the will of the voters. And so now they want to have a party that has a representation like the Electoral College. And I mean, I hope we will get into this later in the episode, but the superdelegates maybe weren't like they used to be.
Yeah.
We have so much money and influence in politics. You become an elected leader, then you're a superdelegate, basically. After you're elected leader, you're still part of the party.
Right.
But the number one thing former elected leaders do is go become lobbyists.
Sure.
So you have a lobbyist right now who's a superdelegate who has said from day one he wants to stop the progressive movement of Warren or Sanders from enacting health care. And he's a lobbying firm for a PAC that's given money to Mitch McConnell and other Republican leaders.
Yeah, I saw that.
It will continue to highlight the argument of that's a moniker for what, and a metaphor for what they're doing every single day in our political system. And that's buying that influence and using it. So the Democratic Party going into this with lobbyists and former elected officials trying to silence the will of the voters, I think is going to be something unseen in politics and not forgotten
but
for a long time.
Aren't they damned if they do and damned if they don't? Because if they go in, let's just say, I'm just going to throw numbers out there and we'll kind of spool it out this way. Let's say we go into Milwaukee in July and Bernie Sanders has 45% of the pledged delegates.
Right.
Okay. And Biden has 35, and then there's a smattering amongst other candidates. Now, according to what you're saying, which I think there's a validity to the argument that Bernie should be the nominee in that case. But hear me out. 55% of the delegates, though, don't want Bernie in that case. So now you're going to have something of a walking away from the party in the general, either way.
No, I think
Bernie or they nominate somebody else.
I think a responsible superdelegate at that point, I think a responsible superdelegate would say the person with the most delegates in this game gets the nominee. If they do want to play a philosophy of their superdelegate vote to be, oh, these people are crazy, I'm the sane one, I will choose for the people what I'm going to decide. And if they're looking at Elizabeth Warren, if she's still in the race and she has 15% of the delegates, well, then there's your 50%. And I think you have to take that into consideration. And I think at that point, she would be the vice presidential pick on the second ballot.
So there would be some sort of a deal made then. In other words, where Warren would swing her pledged delegates over to Sanders in exchange for getting the second pick for the vice presidential nomination.
Yes, I believe so. I think so.
But again,
because it's going to make up 50% more of the Democratic Party. You have the winner in delegates. You have a person who's broken records in fundraising. You have a movement that has energy and enthusiasm.
But doesn't that alienate the moderate wing of the party?
What I'm saying is they might feel alienated, but if the moderate part of the party can talk to me about the last time they won a presidential race, and then tell me their current path is not the definition of insanity,
Well,
I will come aboard.
you can make a good argument though.
But
in
I'm fighting for the party as well.
You can make a good case that in 2016, the alienation of the progressive wing of the party caused Trump to win. That a lot of those people that voted for Sanders in the primaries turned around and voted for Trump, not Clinton.
Yes. If you think about when the moderate part of the party retook its power was under Bill Clinton. And really it's they wanted to change the party. And it was the last time James Carville won an election. And it was the first time. And he ran with an anti-establishment candidate. He ran with somebody outside of the establishment who won. And ever since then, the establishment loses. And the more these party people try to hold their power, the more they push away people, the more they back themselves into a corner, and the more they have no one on their team. And that's kind of what you see is people behind the gears without a lot of support behind them, telling you to go for this candidate. And I'm not going to see 13,000 people in Boston for a rally for Joe Biden when it's 30 degrees outside. And it worries me that is not going to be the movement, just like under Hillary Clinton, or John Kerry, or Al Gore. That's not going to be the movement that is going to get us across the finish line.
There's also two things here. There's also two things we're talking about. We talk about the horse race aspect of this. We talk about the fact that we're trying to elect a president. We also need to talk about governing and governance,
right,
and leading the country after you win the office. And Trump, I think you can say, ran actually a pretty darn good campaign in 2016. He's running a pretty darn good campaign in 2020. I would argue he's been a total abysmal failure as an actual leader in running the country. So there's two separate things here. I mean, there's what you're talking about is getting over the finish line and getting enough pledged delegates and getting enough to actually maybe win in the general. But then will Bernie Sanders have allies on the Hill that can help him accomplish anything? I'm concerned about
Trump
that.
didn't have any allies.
He had more than you think. He didn't have many at the beginning, but he had
Cruz, Rubio, everybody. They all hated each other, and then all of a sudden they coalesced and worked together.
They coalesced and they worked together. Bernie has a lot of people that are really opposed to him in the Democratic Party.
When you're on that type of thing, it's a negotiation, and it's if you want to work well with people, of course. And there's some people that are willing to give up a lot and not get a lot, and there's some people that are willing to do a favor so they get something for their district. A lot of it kind of goes back to game theory. And if the game is you and your partner are handcuffed and you either both agree to lose everything or one of you has to go over the cliff and make the other one agree to let you go, that way you get everything.
Right.
That's a very hard bargain. But the first step is to take a step towards the cliff. And I think it freaks people out. It gets people up in an uproar. But isn't that the way to negotiate for the American people?
It generally is. That's the way Trump does it. I mean, you're advocating for a position that Trump has advocated for since he's been president.
I'll tell you, Trump might not be great at negotiating, not great at some certain things. Some people might say he is. Well, I do think I think game theory and that sort of thing, he does take a step towards the cliff every time.
Yeah.
And you see the Democratic Party right now unlocking the handcuffs.
Well, they're emulating. I think they're emulating that. I think Bernie has taken a page from Trump's playbook a little bit. I mean, that might be kind of a terrible thing to say.
Can you imagine after Vietnam or during Vietnam, the Democratic wing of the same Democratic people that are telling us right now we need to have a more moderate, we need to be still, would have ended that war? You think that would have, I just find it a little bit, not offensive, but I'm just curious as to, even some of my friends who walked around barefoot for years and had this great movement and basically ended the, can credit them with ending the Vietnam War, are now so suddenly not wanting to rock the boat on capitalism for economic rights. And I think the civil rights movement, and I think this movement, 13,000 people in Boston, needs to be recognized. This is an economic rights movement.
Yeah.
And I think Bernie Sanders is just the chosen leader of that right now, but I think it'll continue, and the Democratic Party should be wary of it.
I think you make a fair point, because I think what you're saying is you're comparing it to war, and in the 60s it was an actual shooting war, but the war we have going on right now, an economic war between the classes, not to get too Marx and Engels on it, but this idea that there is an economic war between the classes going on is a valid point, and we're seeing it play out, I think, in the Democratic primary. I think you see the things that Bloomberg's talking about, you see the things that Biden's talking about, you see the things that Sanders and Warren are talking about, and they run counter to one another because they have different visions of what America can be. I'll tell you why. I'm just going to be totally honest. I'll tell you why I'm not a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. And I'm not necessarily of the belief that what he's advocating is wrong or that his ideas are bad. My fear is that the American system is so deeply entrenched with the way that we have the system set up, capitalism, the markets, the market economy, that unspooling that will be so painful. It will be so difficult and it will be so time consuming that he won't have the time. He'll be voted out after 4 years because the difficulty of that is going to be so great that people are going to say, to heck with this. I was happier under Trump.
But I mean, at the same respect, aren't wars difficult? Isn't going to the moon? Didn't JFK said we do things because they are hard?
Of course.
So let me ask you this. Has Bernie Sanders changed the conversation in this country?
He absolutely has. He absolutely has. I give you credit. He absolutely has.
So,
but to my mind, what Obama did with the ACA was a more logical step. Just looking at healthcare, for instance, that was a more logical step because think about the pushback he got on that. As moderate of a step as that was, the pushback he got has been unbelievable, and that's not even 10% of what Bernie wants to do.
If after seeing what he saw now, you think he could go back, you think he'd still do Team of Rivals? You think he'd change his, it's interesting because you do have people that said $15 an hour would never work.
Yep.
That you're going to balloon the inflation, you can't do that. There's people that said Medicare would never work. Works pretty well and it's pretty popular. And I think that's all we're talking about here. And if people could envision, and Republicans have supported this, 55 and over Medicare,
That's true.
and that's very easy to
That's a moderate
consider
step. That's a moderate step, which would make some sense.
But we could,
But it would also layer in a lot more costs.
how are you going to pay for a war? And nobody seems to ask how we're going to pay for a war. But we can pay for Medicare for all.
I mean, you think about it, the most, in the last 100 years, the most radical social tinkering we ever saw in this country was the New Deal in 1932, because that was, you talk about a war, I mean, that was an economic war like we've never had in this country.
War, yeah.
And you had to do that. Now, there was a lot of pushback, but in those days, the Republican Party was almost non-existent because they had been so, so demoralized by Hoover's inability to do anything with the start of the Depression to actually fix the problems that they were thrown out on their keisters in 32. So, Franklin Roosevelt had a mandate, and it took years. It took really until World War II, 8 or 9 years later, for that Depression to really go away. So my question is, do we have that level of commitment to it now? Do we have that level of commitment to, because what Bernie is suggesting is almost as big of a social reengineering economically as what FDR did almost 100 years ago.
I like how this would set up, Mike, because it would be, instead of an establishment party where they'll get a run against Trump will get a run against the Obama years again, you basically have an argument of what FDR said. It's socialism for the wealthy and rugged individualism for the poor. And I think that's like the prize fight right there that will get people out to vote, Why not run up, have Trump answer for some of the socialism he gets? And I mean, the $2 billion from Deutsche Bank handed out to him for a guy that shouldn't even be able to get a loan? And for casinos and for golf courses that end up going bankrupt and they're just write-offs to the American taxpayer.
Yep.
The farmer bailouts were almost, I don't know, I heard a story the other day, almost the bank bailouts, but the farmer bailouts have been extremely huge.
Sure.
And these are failed trade policies. These are bailouts in socialism, in my mind, because of a terrible trade policy, just like a mistake one would make in a terrible economic deal. I mean, Bloomberg is right on the fact that Trump squandered his fortune. Terribly.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Bernie Sanders would expose that and expose the fraud he is, and the fraud that this, economic system is to the American people working on the ground.
Okay, now we're going to be joined by Bob Mulholland with us here. Bob is a Vietnam veteran, a Democratic National Committee member, and also a very important guy here in the state. A lot of information he can share with us. So Bob, thanks for joining us.
And a delegate to 11 national conventions.
And a delegate to 11 national conventions. There you go. So what do you think? Tonight we had South Carolina. The polls have been closed now for about an hour. Looking like a good night for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and the DNC put together a schedule that 4 states could be in February and no other state. And this is one of the few times that the other states didn't violate it.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Yeah, so it's a good month. And obviously I think we've had several candidates. I suspend my campaign to spend more time with my family. And I think probably very soon we'll have 1 or 2 more say it's over. I made my effort. But I think most of the candidates that fought in South Carolina and didn't do well will continue.
Mm-hmm. Continue on. Well, Super Tuesday is only, 2 days away?
And there's a big question for Elizabeth Warren. Right now, she and Sanders are tied in Massachusetts, and that's her home state. Mm-hmm. He's obviously the senator next door, right. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, 45, you were telling us right before we started, 45 delegates tonight are going to be awarded, and whoever doesn't get, if only one candidate gets more than 15%, then no one else gets any delegates.
Correct, and obviously I don't know how long it's going to take South Carolina. They may be counting for days at final 2 or 3%. Right. And I've seen in California, for instance, 2016, the 53 congressional districts we have, we did not, and many of them have an odd number, whether 5 or 7, we did not know in 16 until the 30th day that Sanders won this particular congressional and Hillary won this other one. So I don't know the situation in South Carolina. But the party is the one that handles it there, so hopefully it all works out.
Yeah, so, but I mean, right now, the way, and again, we're only an hour out of the polls closing there in South Carolina. It looks like Biden's going to get somewhere around 40 to 45% of the vote, we think. I think that's the projection right now from the AP. And then Steyer, as well as Sanders, might be more like in that 12 to 15% range. We're not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, and then the others will have their small amounts.
The others, and only about 5 candidates, I think, right now have won delegates in February. Mm-hmm. If you don't win delegates, pretty soon you realize you're alone.
Well, yeah, I would imagine so. That's kind of the name of the game, right?
As I always jokingly say that if you go through several campaigns, you have one delegate, you find out your neighbor in the middle of the night took down your lawn sign.
Which is not a good thing.
No.
When you're trying to run for president.
I admire people who run for office. I admire these people who put up with the abuse. But I always try to tell politicians, remember, nobody's shooting at you. So it may be rough, but it's not really that rough.
It's not really a war.
No.
And sometimes we think it's a war, but it's not really a war.
Right. I mean, you get abused verbally, but it's not like somebody shooting at you. So relax. And for most of them, people are contributing to the campaign to pay for their hotels. It's not out of their pocket. Obviously, Steyer and Bloomberg, it's out of their pocket.
They can afford it.
Yes.
They can afford it. We were talking before we had you on. I mean, there's really kind of 2 races going on here. There's the race for delegates, which of course is the real race. But the shadow race is kind of the horse race, the media race, the spinning. Kind of what we're doing right now, really, talking about it and the pundits deciding who won, who lost. So tonight, again, it looks like Biden's going to have a good night. If he didn't have a good night, let's say Biden only won 30% of the delegates, but he still won the state. The press would really hit him over the head because he was projected to win like 40%. So, this idea that the press, I mean, Trump may be onto something. The press really does shape a lot of the discourse, maybe not fairly. Is that a fair thing to say?
No, I'm a big believer that it's the candidate or the campaign that's responsible for creating the press stories. If you're weak at creating press, the press will write the story. If you have something to say, the press will follow you. Yeah, so I never blame the press, unless there's an absolute mistake. But as far as them writing stories, hey, it's probably reflective of what happened.
You think so?
Absolutely.
We got you in a great mood today, but I've seen James Carville flying off the handle, and
He's making a statement.
I can't. I can't. Whenever I see him, I'm thinking maybe that's your reaction too. So the story in the New York Times, Bob, thank you for your service to this country. The story in the New York Times of the 93 superdelegates saying that they would block a Sanders nomination. How do you kind of see your role as a superdelegate?
Well, let me remind you that none of us, including Congressman John Lewis, will be voting. We were all denied our rights. So John Lewis was almost beaten to death in '65 by Southern Democrats, but now this year it's national Democrats have taken his vote away. And the governors of the United States, governors, can't vote. So that means you got almost 4,000 delegates who are elected at the grassroots. So if you're a delegate elected at the grassroots for Elizabeth Warren, you read our rules, it says you vote for Elizabeth Warren. And I don't know why people get confused about that.
On the first ballot.
Huh?
On the first ballot.
Every time until she releases you. It's a myth that you're going to be waterboarded to vote for somebody that you didn't go there for. Take 2008, Hillary Clinton went up to the mic and she released her delegates to vote for Obama. But if you read the rules and you got elected by the grassroots, what are you going to stab the grassroots in the back? You're going to get to Milwaukee and say, you know what, I didn't really mean that. I'm going to vote for somebody else. And Sanders wrote these rules. And Sanders made the case in 2016. He said, don't automatically make the person who's first in the pledged delegates. Don't do that. That's what he told all the DNC members. That's what he told all the delegates. So we're following the Sanders rule.
Well, and that's one side. If it was negotiated,
well, it's Sanders' rule. And then he's the one that authored the DNC rules for this year to take away the votes of John Lewis and Governor Newsom. He's the one that authored it. So let's stick to the rules.
Well, we still have superdelegates that are lobbyists for PACs that give to Republican parties, or lobbyists that are for the health insurance industry.
We have Congress members.
That's why
they're
they
all
want
Congress members or DNC members.
Former elected officials too.
But like, out of almost 5,000 that may vote on the second ballot, you're like bringing up somebody that works for a lobby. Do you have something against the lobbyists for Planned Parenthood?
No.
Do you have something against for the lobbyists for Planned Parenthood or the Sierra Club?
No,
all right, let's make that clear, because sometimes people get all caught up in making accusations, and they'll say, oh, I'm not going to take a contribution from a federal PAC, like in '08. I said, do you know Obama has a federal PAC? Oh, no, he doesn't. I said, his campaign is a federal PAC. So why can't he take contributions from Planned Parenthood? It's a corporation. You know Planned Parenthood?
Well, and I'm not going to accuse. I want to understand.
I just want to state the facts.
Understand the philosophy of a superdelegate that says, in a way, I can't rely on you people here because this happened and I'm the one that will oversee this. But it's the same party that says we want to get rid of the Electoral College, and we feel that
that's kind of a silly argument that activists bring up. Like Electoral College, it was designed in the 1700s, should have never had it, but it's not being thrown out. So that's kind of a silly discussion, but activists sometimes bring that up, and once in a while a politician. But what's your point? The Governor Newsom should do what?
No,
what's your point? Governor Newsom should do what?
One person, one vote.
Correct.
As far as the leader of the delegate, the race of the delegate,
the leader of the delegates,
whoever has the most delegates going into the second ballot should be the nominee.
That's not what Sanders said. He disagrees with you.
Well, let me ask you this: is the party?
Okay, when somebody says the party, who are you talking about?
The Democratic Party.
No, you're talking about individuals.
Well, I'm talking about the party organization, the DNC. Okay.
Which is full of governors, mayors, and everybody with a different opinion.
Okay, but let's. The question I have for you is the DNC damned if they do and damned if they don't? In other words, regardless of what happens here, there's a schism in the party. There's a schism in terms of. I know, but it's pretty well defined right now.
It is?
So
what is it?
It seems like it's pretty well defined between this moderate and progressive wing. I mean,
well, I'll tell you another example. Only 12 or 14% of the people who are 65 and older, the voters, will support Sanders.
I know.
So that's a schism with the older people.
And they
vote, right?
I get it.
People in their 70s who own a home and live in a community for 20 years, they vote.
No.
You know, 2 days ago, the state of California, the returns, 20% total 2 days ago. I looked at the 18 to 34. Take a guess what the return is so far.
5%.
30%.
8%. So if you look at the under 25, it's 4%.
4%.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Then look at the 65 plus, 38, 40%.
Yeah.
So when you say the party is run by the chair is Tom Perez, has a DNC board, but we're just more like a rubber stamp. So Sanders came in 17 with a proposal to take away John Lewis's vote, and against my wishes, the DNC voted for that.
Well, when I say they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, the question is, I mean, is it inevitable that a wing of the voters now, the constituency, will not turn out in the general because there doesn't seem like there's anybody who's running that can unify the party? Is that a fair statement?
Well, like take the nurses, for instance, the national nurses. They decided in 2016 not to support Hillary Clinton. They said Trump was the same. So Trump has appointed 2 federal judges, Supreme Court, and hundreds of others. And Trump gets a second term, probably people like me will be picked up. Yeah, people can make their own decisions, but most people never connect the dots. Oh, the president appoints federal judges, and the federal judge just ruled that it's okay to put Muslims in jail? Oh, and here's a great thing by liberal activists. That can't be legal. And I always say, no, actually, if it's the judges say it's legal, it's legal.
Right.
You know, it took a Supreme Court decision led by a former California governor, Earl Warren, 9-0 to end segregation. Congress would have never ended segregation. Maybe this century they would have. Well, maybe not, because just this week, did you read it? They finally voted to ban outlaw lynching. 4 people in Congress and the House voted against that. This is 2020, and they just outlawed that. So the party is the Southern Party of the 1800s with solid segregation, and they always got elected. Now the party of the nation is somewhat out of sync on social issues with most Americans.
And what does that mean? I mean, what's that going to mean for the general? I mean,
Well, it's trouble. We the Democrats have not won. Our Democrat for president has not won a majority of white voters since 1964.
No.
LBJ.
LBJ.
The average liberal would say, well, when I say that to him in a workshop, that can't be true. Because my friends voted for whatever.
Yeah.
See, you remember what McGovern guy said after the 672 election? Tom McGovern? He says, I don't know how George McGovern lost 49 states when everybody I know voted for George. That's the trouble.
Well, he didn't run on anything. He had no agenda,
Did you vote for McGovern? Did you vote for McGovern in 72?
Yeah, because that was my first presidential vote.
You were a young
Well, I had
guy.
to be 21 to.
Well, I mean, so you're a young guy. You voted for McGovern.
Take us back.
Do you see an analog between the McGovern campaign and the young people that were enthusiastic and were optimistic, and maybe some of the young Sanders voters? Is there an analog
yeah,
there?
sure, there's a lot of that. But when I was in Reno 4 years ago for the caucus, I run caucuses over there. I noticed the Sanders line, this is 2016, was mostly older white men, and some of them had McGovern t-shirts on.
Yeah, way back when. That's it. Yeah.
Why the change of heart? If you felt passionately about,
I'm for Biden, is that your question?
no, but I mean back then. Let's go back.
Look, I wasn't involved in the party in 72, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
McGovern was a
involved in
nominee.
75.
I voted
Yeah.
for the nominee.
You were going to vote for Nixon.
Yeah, what's the question?
Well, I wonder if Nixon was running as a Democrat, But
He might be a
Bob,
Democrat
I want
today.
to move on to an easier topic for you, and that's running for the DNC spot for California delegate. A lot of people up here in Northern California support you because you're our only hope. I mean, when you look at the list of people running for DNC for California, it's 40 people from LA and 20 people from San Francisco, and you, Bob, up north.
No,
And it
we
just
got
says north.
somebody from Sacramento and somebody from Sonoma, but mostly from LA. But LA is 1/4 of the state population.
Again, representation of the Democratic Party to voters. I mean, why is it so concentrated of LA influential? And in my mind, when I see 20 or 40 people signed up for LA and then you up here, I obviously want you up here because I want to have a
Thank you,
voice.
but you don't vote.
Well, I'm not an executive yet.
Executive board, right.
Yes,
Well, let's not overrate the DNC members. Let me give you an inside story. The DNC will meet this whole year for 1 hour for coffee in Milwaukee. The only purpose of all this is to win our congressional or House or Senate. So it's not like we're some Chevron board of directors talking about policy. No, and if we elect a president, that president will pick the next chair. We will have our meeting in January, say, here's our chair, everybody says aye.
You got any?
We don't get any paid, we don't get any.
You got any back pocket people you'd like to see, Nancy or anybody you'd be like, maybe in a meeting you'd be like, well, why don't we think about Sherrod Brown or something like that if it got to
People, in old days, governors came with what they called uncommitted. Bring 50 delegates, they're all beholden to the governor. Maybe some of them had jobs. And the governors would sometimes meet and pick a person. I mean, we used to have not many primaries. John Kennedy was picked by the insiders. Turned out to be a great pick. Unfortunately, we lost him. And Sherrod Brown is a good senator, but historically, senators don't do well. People, Obama won. Well, he's running against another senator. Governors and former governors, and generals like Grant and Ike, and then Trump, who was on TV, and the Democrats, we let Hillary down. We ran a lousy campaign. It was 39,000 votes in 3 states.
Yeah, it wasn't many.
Would have put Hillary in the White, and she would have appointed the Supreme Court, and we'd be all safe. Here's my prediction: if Trump gets a second term, marriage equality, Roe v. Wade are gone.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
might be Social Security and Medicare too?
Oh yeah, Social Security and Medicare will be radically reduced. Because if you're Trump and the Republicans, hey, we got a mandate. It was very clear. And guess what? The U.S. Supreme Court has Obamacare on the agenda. I don't know if you followed it, but they decided to rule on it after the November. So Obamacare is going out too.
If he gets reelected.
Yeah. So the court might throw it out in November.
Let me ask you this, because we're kind of running out of time with you and running out of light as well. What's your prediction? What do you think we're going to see here in the state in terms of the presidential primary in a couple of days? Who do you think is going to be?
Sanders, I've said this to reporters, Sanders could win all 415 delegates if nobody else gets 15%.
So if he wins in a row.
Yeah, because you have multiple candidates, as my quote in the paper says, you have multiple candidates, and it could be like a NASCAR car crash.
Yeah.
And the one driver just goes around the last round, and everybody else is
gone.
Paramedics, fire extinguishers.
Well, if that happened, if he won all or even the vast majority of the delegates, this thing's over. I mean,
no, I wouldn't say that, because Biden could win some of the southern states. You need 1991.
1991, yep.
Nobody wins because they have 1,800. You have to have 1991.
I know,
and once you go to the second ballot, now you need about 2,300.
But momentum is a real thing, and I mean, if Sanders were to wipe up in California, that's going to lend a lot of momentum to his campaign.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think right now, gun to your head, that Sanders is going to be the nominee, or do you?
I don't know. I don't want to prejudge. I mean, I'm just one vote.
Yeah.
I'm not a governor.
13,000 people coming out in 30-degree weather to see Sanders in Boston.
Well, we're going to.
Those are Democrats.
We're going to have to. Yeah, remember, 136 million people voted in the general election. Activists always get caught up. Look at this big crowd. Well, you know how many people watched the last show of MASH? Yeah. 120 million.
I love your answer to that. I knew he was going to come with that.
Yeah.
Because the activists. But you can't be denied, Bob. Those are voters, and those are disenfranchised.
Look, everybody's an individual. They can assume they're disenfranchised. I don't like to hold hands with people. I'm an American. I served in Vietnam. I was wounded. And when somebody comes along in the general, I don't really like the candidate. I have no time for them, because we have over 2 million Latinos who are U.S. citizens who aren't registered. Let's go after the Latinos, because guess what? They'll vote for the nominee. They don't need their hand held.
Good point, my man. Well,
All right.
Bob, it's always great to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining
Bob,
us.
if Bernie's got 47%, and Elizabeth of the delegates, and Elizabeth Warren is sitting there with 17%, them together make over 50%. Is that way heavy enough on superdelegates to say maybe we need some progressive
Let me clarify
voice?
something. Do you think that Gavin Newsom and the 32 superdelegates all are the same candidate? Or the governor of Virginia, or the governor of Pennsylvania, or the John Lewis? Guess what? They're all over the map, like regular people. It's a complete myth created by the media and opponents. Oh, there's 700 people that are waiting to vote for one candidate. Give me a break. We don't have the same wives or husbands, and we're all over the map.
Bob, I love you, man. Good luck on your run for DNC.
Thank you very much.
Don't get arrested with Jane Fonda again, okay? We can't bail you out all the time, man. Bob got
Bob
$50 cash got me bailed out.
We're going to have him back on the show, okay? Keep on talking
anytime.
about going forward. All right, well, that's our show. We want to thank you all for tuning in. We also want to thank our sponsor on today's show, the North State Labor Federation, AFL-CIO, which promotes social justice for working people in our community.
Man. Thank you.
To learn more, visit online at northstatelabor.org. Thanks as well to our guest, Bob Mulholland, for giving us his insight into the state of the Democratic presidential primary here in California and across the nation. We appreciate that, Bob. Finally, thanks to Crush, the folks at Crush, for having us here today and hosting us. That was fun to be here with them, with some great food as well. Appreciate that. Don't forget, like us on Facebook. We love your likes, so please like us there. And we have live coverage of Super Tuesday coming up on Tuesday. Believe it or not, Tuesday, March 3rd. If you haven't voted, get your ballot in the mail, folks. You only have a couple more days. Make sure you get that ballot in the mail by March 3rd, and please vote. And that's it. So we thank you all for being with us today. Thanks to Bob Mulholland. Thanks to Crush. Thanks to Aaron. We'll see you next time on NorCal News Now. So long.